Great. I'll call to order the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Before we start, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence of memory of Dave Danielson. As a lot of you know, Dave's had been a commissioner for over 30 years and the chair from 97 to 99, and was the first person to win or award the Raymond Clausen Award. So I'm not aware of all Dave's other activities, but I do know he was very active in the town and the state also. So just a moment of silence, and then after that we can ask for any other comments or thoughts. Thank you. Does anybody want to share anything as far as?
I'll say something. Thank you. Dave was a dear friend and mentor for me. He was a member of Bedford Rotary for 21 years or so. I first met him when we were both in the National Guard years and years ago. He was in National Guard, I believe, for 20 some years. A member of the Bedford Planning Board, a member of the Bedford Town Council for many years, and of course, a state rep, now I believe in his 8th term. He will be missed dearly by the town and by the state. He was one of those middle of the road guys that helped work compromises and work across the aisle in the State House, type of politician we desperately need in the state and in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I remember that occasionally he would come into the office and he always seemed to have a joke. And if he didn't have a joke off the top of his head, he'd look on his phone and he'd scroll through his jokes of the day and he'd tell us all the jokes.
Anyone else?
Yeah, if I could, I met David through the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission many years ago, and he helped show me the ropes along with Bob Wheeler. And David was just a great guy. We didn't necessarily agree on politics that much, but it didn't matter. We had a great exchange of ideas, and he was the quintessential man who wanted to help his community and help his state. I'll miss him for sure.
Peter Griffin, I concur with everything that has been said. I met Dave through Southern New Hampshire Planning, and he was just such an amazing person. His obituary was in today's Union Leader, which I forwarded to Linda this morning, and he was one of those endangered species called a martyr. You may not have agreed with him on politics, but the differences could be discussed in a civilized manner. And I was just astounded at his accomplishments and his contributions to the community.
Yeah, thanks for sending that along, Peter. I think you found it before I did, and I did send it out to commissioners this morning.
Yeah, Dave, Ray Clement here. He kind of followed, or I followed him. I'm a graduate of Bishop Bradley. I was 2 years ahead of him. And also the St. A's, I was 2 years ahead of him there. And I met him in other times and everything else. He was always a gentleman and stuff, and you could always depend upon him. So he'll be greatly missed.
All right, well, thanks everyone. So moving on to our first order of business, we'll combine the roll call with the action on the minutes of April 27th, 2021. Anybody up first?
Jeff, I don't know that did you read the whole thing? Did I miss that?
Oh, did I forget to read the, yeah, I did. All right, the chair of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission has found that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission and committees thereof are authorized to meet electronically. All right, so do we have a motion on the meeting minutes of April 27th, 2021?
Chairman, I move the approval of April 27th.
Al,
I'll second.
Peter,
All right, Al Hall made the motion and Peter Griffin seconded. I'll go through the roll call. So we're both letting everyone know you're here, as well as voting on the meeting minutes. So Bill Herman, Auburn,
Here and yes.
Jeffrey Porter, Auburn,
Here and yes.
Bedford, Bill DeShaco,
Here and yes.
Bedford, Charlie Fairman.
Yes.
And just if everyone can mute unless you're chatting, that'd be great, because we're hearing some fun background jingles and such. So thanks, everyone. Barbara Salvatore, Bedford.
Here and abstain.
Thanks, Barbara. Candia Al Hall.
Yes, here.
Thank you. And Dick Snow.
Present and I.
Thank you. Chester, we have Deb Munson.
Here and yes.
Okay, great. I didn't see Andrew Haddock. Andrew, you're not here, and did I miss you? No, good. Let's see. I didn't see anyone from Deerfield. From Derry, we have Jeff Moulton.
here and yes.
From Francistown, we have Alfred Eisenberg.
Here and yes.
Thank you. And Linda Kuhnhart.
Here and yes.
Thank you, Linda. From Goffstown, we have Joanne Duffy.
Here and yes.
Thank you. I didn't see anyone from Hooksett yet. From Londonderry, we have Brian Battaglia.
Here and yes.
Arthur Rugg.
I am here and yes on the minutes.
Thank you. And Marty Srugas.
I'm here and abstain.
Thanks, Marty. From Manchester, we have Peter Capano,
I'm here and yes.
Ray Clement,
Here and yes.
and Dan O'Neill.
Here and abstain.
Wonderful. From New Boston, we have Mark Sunan.
Here and I.
I did not see anyone from Ware. And from Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin.
Yes and yes. Here and yes.
Thank you. And John Hiltz.
Here and abstain.
From our voting agencies, we have from DOT, William Rose.
Yeah, present and an abstention.
Thank you. And Mike Witten from MTA.
I'm here and I vote yes.
Just for the record, for a non-voting member, we have Tim White. And did I miss anyone? All right, great.
All right, moving on to new business. First item, Carl is going to talk about the Transportation Improvement Program Amendment number 1.
Morning. Thanks, Jeff. Again, my name's Carl Epic. I'm the Principal Transportation Planner here at Southern New Hampshire Planning. And we just have this is a brief presentation on about 10 projects amendments to the TIP. I'm just going to bring it up now. Let's see, share screen if I can do that. Whoever's got control, I need the okay for sharing. I'm not sure if that's
Linda, that's you?
Linda or Sylvia.
I looked, I can't do that. It's Linda. She came in first.
Okay. So it'll just be a second here. But this is, we're in the 2021-2024 TIP period, Transportation Improvement Program, for those not fully up to speed on that acronym.
Were you able to find the spot, Linda?
Okay, it looks like I've got control now. Okay.
Okay, great.
And I just need to. Can everybody see what looks like a view on Canuck of Manchester? Okay, so here we go. So DOT has requested that we amend our 2021-2024 TIP, again, to accommodate a series of project additions, removals, funding cost adjustments, and scope changes. And I'm going to call out the ones as we go through here that are just scope changes. And in some cases, it simply means before there wasn't a worded scope, or at least they're going to change it. And now they're trying to get it to be consistent. We're trying to get it consistent with the different documents that are required for the federal process. The other important detail here is that this, of course, has to go through a public comment period, and we'll begin that with your permission on June 7th and convene it at a public hearing with you all on June 22nd. First project for amendment number 1 is a Bedford Merrimack project. This is to improve the Bedford Mainline Toll Plaza to institute all electronic tolling, which is, of course, very excited at that toll barrier. And the amendment is simply to add a 2021-2022 PE phase and to increase construction phase funding, and then overall to delay the construction to 2023-2024. And the reason for this proposed amendment is that the cost and timeline of the project have been updated to reflect this new all electronic AET scope of work. Second one, also in the same area, but just north, Manchester's reconstruction of exit 7 on the FE Everett Turnpike, I-293. And this proposed amendment is to remove the project from the TIP, albeit temporarily. And the reason for this is that both the I-293 exit 6 and 7 reconstruction projects, which you all should be familiar with, that are coming at those 2 interchanges, they're being delayed due to program fiscal constraints related to toll revenue decreases in the COVID-19 pandemic. And although it's not in this TIP, this also affects, down here at the bottom is a note about, for Manchester, the exit 6 reconstruction project, also delayed from the 2025-2028 to 2028-2031. So those projects are both being pushed back a little bit related to the revenues in the turnpike. The next one, this is noted as Nashua and Manchester. It's the New Hampshire Capital Corridor project. Again, calling these out. The proposed amendments for scope change only, and now they wish to define the scope of the project as, quote, design, environmental review, and a financial plan for commuter rail extension from Mass to New Hampshire. And this one is, again, the reason for this amendment is to define the scope of the project to mirror what is in the adopted 10-year plan, the 2021-2030 10-year transportation improvement plan. Next project is a transit project. This is program Federal Transit Authority 5339. This is for capital bus and bus facilities. This is a statewide program, but it affects our area. The proposed amendment is increasing the 2021-2023 funding and decreasing 2024 funding. Overall, it's quite a bit more money. I seem to remember it goes from an overall of 6.7, 6.8, for example, up to 9.5, 9.6, et cetera, over these years. It's just in the last year, the 2024, where it goes down slightly. And Nate and I looked at that, and we think it's probably just a small adjustment related to projecting that far forward. And the reason for this amendment is to reflect the increased federal apportionments to New Hampshire for this FTA funding and the anticipated project expenditures associated with that. The next one is program LTAP, which stands for Local Technology Assistance Program. And this is federal money administered at the Technology Transfer Center at UNH. And this amendment is, again, to change just some of the notation in the documentation of the work from SPR to other. And the reason for this proposed amendment is an administrative change to, again, ensure consistently with federally recognized work phases. Next one's another program, TISMO, as we call it. It's a statewide transportation systems management and operation, ITS, which stands for Intelligent Transportation Services. Technologies, travel info. These are the signs you see on the highway are incorporated or included in this category of projects. The proposed amendment, good news, to increase funding in fiscal year 2023-2024. And the reason for this amendment is to reflect anticipated project expenditures in 9 statewide efforts. And then we just included a sampling here. Software upgrades for cybersecurity upgrades, operational needs, replacing and maintaining some existing ITS devices, and things like providing remote traffic signal communications where feasible. Another statewide project, this is for road weather information systems. Proposed amendment is again scope change only to define the scope of the project as to install road and weather information systems around the state. And the reason for this amendment is to better represent the anticipated project work, scope of work. Next statewide project is for signal repairs at various intersections throughout the state. Proposed amendment to add a new project for signal repairs at 16 locations statewide. And in our region, we looked at the list. The program includes work on a signal specifically for meter and pedestal work in Hooksett at the intersection of New Hampshire 28 bypass and New Hampshire 27. And the reason for this amendment is, again, state-funded repair project to address damage and maintenance. Signals get taken out, damaged, needing maintenance, and this requires funding. So this is a new project to tackle those 16 locations. This statewide project is for statewide USGS 2021 ortho imagery acquisition, a scope change only. This is the images from airplanes. To define the scope of the project as statewide USGS 2021 ortho imagery acquisition and services. It just needed to be added to represent the anticipated scope of work for the project. And those are the projects. Any questions that you may have? Happy to handle them now.
Anything changed with regard to exit 4A?
James has got a question. I don't know if I'm seeing all of it. How does the change in scope of the capital corridor project affect the work to be completed in the TIP timeframe? Why has the scope changed? James, my recollection of this one is just to add the actual language. I don't believe it changes the scope, the time frame. And so the scope itself isn't so much that it's changed, but they've added detail on what they're going to do.
Carl, did you hear Jeff's question?
No, I didn't.
Anything on exit 4A in this time window?
Not as part of this TIP amendment, Jeff. I'm not sure if Nate knows anything more about that. I know that's going to come up at some point soon.
Yeah, Jeff, there's no change in TIP amendment number 1 related to exit 4. Basically the work plan that Bill Oldenburg laid out a couple of months ago with exit 4, to my knowledge, is still the path forward on the project.
All right, thanks. All right, any other questions for Carl?
I have one. You mentioned, I think you mentioned a scope change for exit 6 in Manchester. Was that an increase in scope or a decrease in scope?
Scope change. Let me see. I don't think it was, bear with me a second. I don't believe it's so
There's
much.
no scope change for exit
Yeah.
6. It's just it's a delay in construction of the project due to the turnpike fiscal constraints.
Yep, purely a delay. And specifically, Peter, from 2025, 2028 to 2028, 2031.
Wow, so 3 years.
Thank you, COVID.
Oh.
It's time to tax the electric cars.
So, Carl, this is Mark Sudin from New Boston. You mentioned a TISMO modification. One of the things that was on your slide said funding for MPOs and RPCs for ITS plans. Is that something that Southern New Hampshire will get a piece of in, say, 2023?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mark. It's usually, that would have to be a specific allocation to us, I think. Maybe something that lands in our region.
I think I might be able to shed a little bit of light on that. I think, Mark, what they're, through our unified planning work program, we have an activity in our unified planning work program to develop and maintain a regional ITS architecture, which we have. And we've been talking with Federal Highway Administration and New Hampshire DOT about whether it makes sense for MPOs to be maintaining their own separate regional architectures, or whether there's a way to improve the statewide architecture to be more reflective of the needs of individual regions within the state. So I think part of what you see in that bullet point is that they may be intending to fund a more comprehensive and inclusive and statewide ITS architecture that may reflect better the unique needs of the regions, and then we may have a discussion with them about simply using that statewide architecture as our regional architecture if the needs of our region are appropriately reflected in it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I have a question. Mr. Chairman?
There's a question from Hilda Shaka.
Question. Yes, has like the work for exits 6 and 7, is there any chance that could be submitted under the congressional set earmark programs?
I don't know if those have been defined yet, have they?
The earmarks have. It's probably too late, Jeff, but I'm sure there'll be another round.
Well, we just did a submittal last Friday, so I don't know if that's a different one. But
No, it's the same one. I said it's a little late, but looking down the road, this has still not been resolved, obviously.
Right.
Just a thought.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I think pursuing earmark funding for a project like that's a state project. I think we would defer to DOT. I don't know what conversations DOT may have had with the federal delegation specific to the exit 6 and 7 project. William Rose, I know, is on the call. I don't know, William, if there have been any discussions or not about exit 6 and 7 as it relates to the various earmark discussions that are happening with the federal delegation. If there's anything you want to share on that, feel free. Otherwise, we can follow up with New Hampshire DOT and see what their thinking may be on that, Bill.
Yeah, how about we leave it as, I know that there's been a lot of conversations between the front office and the federal delegation. I don't know the specifics of all the projects that were discussed, but I will get clarification on that for you, Nate.
Okay, thank you.
all right. Any other questions or comments for Carl?
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our next item is the regional public transit safety targets with Nate.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen quickly and just walk through a brief presentation about the adoption of regional public transit safety targets. Can everybody see this
Yes.
slide on the screen? Okay, great. And Mike Whitten is on the call as well. So, if there's any context that Mike would like to add to any of this discussion, I will yield the floor to him in a few minutes. But what we're talking about today is regional public transportation safety requirements. And so this dates back to July 19th of 2018. The Federal Transit Administration published a rulemaking called the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan Rule. And for short, that's referenced as PTASP, because we planner types need to have acronyms for everything, even if those acronyms don't exactly roll off the tongue, and this one is PTASP. So the PTASP rule became effective 1 year later. So it became effective on July 19th, 2019. And the rule includes requirements for transit operators in urbanized areas. And in our area, in our region, that is basically Manchester Transit Authority. It used to be Manchester Transit Authority and CART, but now CART is merged under the administrative umbrella of the Manchester Transit Authority. So the only transit operator that this affects in our region is the Manchester Transit Authority. And it also affects metropolitan planning organizations like the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, and requires us to adopt public transportation safety performance targets. So this rule became effective in 2019, but due to the, the COVID pandemic, there have been 2 delays in the compliance requirements of this rule. So it's been pushed back twice, each time for 6 months. So the compliance is now, the deadline is now July 21st, 2021. Back in February, on February 23rd, the Manchester Transit Authority adopted its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan and included agency-level safety performance targets. So that means that under that rule, the PTASP rule that was, which is now codified as Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 673, we, as the SNHPC, acting as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, must set our regional transit safety targets no more than 180 days later. So that's what we're talking about today. What are the federally required public transportation safety measures? They are number of fatalities, rate of fatalities, number of injuries, rate of injuries, number of safety events, which is a specific term that we'll talk about in a moment, the rate of safety events, and system reliability. Those are the 7 public transportation safety measures. As the Manchester Transit Authority is the only applicable transit provider in the region that falls under the PTASP rule, our Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, has recommended that the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission adopt the MTA's public transportation safety targets as the region's public transportation safety targets. So that's what I'm going to walk through for the next couple of minutes, are what are the MTA's public transportation safety targets, because our proposal is to simply adopt the MTA's targets as the region's targets. What are the MTA's targets related to fatalities? Well, it's pretty straightforward. There have not been any fatalities on either the fixed route or demand response system of Manchester Transit Authority, and their target for the coming year is 0 fatalities and therefore 0 rate of fatalities. So that's pretty straightforward, and we would certainly want to adopt that as our region's target as well. For injuries, there have been 2 injuries in the fixed route system and 1 injury on the demand response system over the past year. And an injury is defined as an injury requiring medical attention at a location other than the location at which the event occurred. So if somebody needed to be transported off-site or go off-site to a clinic or to a hospital or to an emergency room or whatever the case may be for treatment, that is considered an injury for this purpose. So the Manchester Transit Authority's annual injury target is, are 2 injuries on the fixed route system, 1 injury on the demand response system, and the corresponding rate is calculated per 500,000 vehicle revenue miles. So that basically 1.6 injuries per 500,000 vehicle revenue miles on the fixed route system. That's what that column refers to. Safety events. A safety event, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, but a safety event is one of 4 different things. It's a fatality confirmed within 30 days, an injury requiring transportation away from the scene for medical attention, or any serious injury, or beyond that, any substantial property damage to facilities, equipment, rolling stock, or infrastructure that disrupts the operations of a transit agency. So that number 4 there is kind of a broader net that covers a lot of different things. So for the Manchester Transit Authority, their target is 17 safety events under that definition on the fixed route system, and 7 demand response safety events on the demand response system. Again, MTA calculates its rate for safety events based on that 500,000 vehicle revenue mile kind of denominator. So that's what the safety events rate corresponds to. And then lastly is a measure of system reliability. And system reliability is defined as the mean distance or number of miles between major mechanical failures. And so the Manchester Transit Authority's system reliability targets are 30,460 miles between major mechanical failures on the fixed route system and 13,764 miles on the demand response system. So those are the measures that we would propose and targets that we would propose to adopt as the region's targets. What I just walked through in terms of fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability. This was laid out in the staff report that accompanied your meeting materials for the meeting. We also, I think, included with the staff report the full copy of the Manchester Transit Authority's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. And Mike Whitten, not to put you on the spot per se, but beyond what I've just mentioned, is there anything else you'd like to mention to the MPO in terms of context for the targets that MTA has adopted and that we are proposing to adopt as the region's targets?
No, I couldn't have done that better than you did. That was perfect.
Thank you. So with that, we would welcome any questions or welcome a motion to adopt the MTA's public transit safety targets as the region's targets.
So moved, Linda Kuhnhart, Francistown.
I second, Barbara Salvatore.
Okay, I'll go through the, let's see, where am I? Ah, here we are. I will go through the list. Bill Herman, Auburn.
Yes.
Jeff Porter, Auburn. Jeff, you just have to unmute. We might have lost Jeff. No, Jeff Porter is right there. All right, he may have stepped away. Bedford, Bill DeShaco.
Yes.
Charlie Fairman.
Yes.
Barbara Salvatore.
Yes.
Candia Al Hall. You're muted over there.
I'm sorry, I put us on mute.
Yes.
Al votes yes. He's saying yes at the back.
Okay. Dick Snow.
Aye.
From Chester, we have Deb Munson.
Yes.
Thanks, Deb. From Derry, Jeff Moulton.
Yes.
From Francistown, Alfred Eisenberg.
Yes.
Also from Francistown, we have Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Goffstown, we have Joanne Duffy.
Yes.
From Londonderry, we have Brian Battaglia
Yes.
and Arthur Rugg
Yes.
and Marty Strugus.
Yes on that.
Thanks, Marty. From Manchester, we have Peter Capano. And Peter, you just have to unmute.
Yes.
Thank you. Also from Manchester, we have Ray Clement.
Yes.
Thanks, Ray. And Dan O'Neill.
Yes.
From New Boston, we have Mark Sunin.
Yes.
No one from Ware yet. From Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin
Yes.
and John Hiltz.
Yes.
Let's just jump back real quick. Jeff Porter from Auburn. Are you back with us yet, Jeff? Maybe just have to unmute. Okay, let's go back to the agency voting members. We have William Rose, DOT.
Abstention?
Thank you. And Mike Whitten from MTA.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Sylvia, this is Barbara Griffin. I'm here. I vote yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Barbara. Sorry, I didn't see you pop in. Nate must have been quick on that one. Let's see. I think that's it for this, right?
All right. Okay, so if there's any other business, we can, otherwise we can adjourn the MPO.
Oh, we have a raised hand from James.
Chairman Moulton, I just want to give a quick, a brief update to the MPO that as part of the Planning Commission's intention and efforts to increase public participation and through guidance from Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration via their virtual public involvement guidance, we are going to conduct some additional outreach in terms of letting the public know about MPO in TAC meetings in the future. And so we're testing out using some new software called Eventbrite, Facebook, other platforms to let people know about these meetings so that the broader audience can be aware of these meetings, ongoing public meetings, and have access through new platforms. We're trying this out as a pilot, and if we run into any challenges with it, we can certainly adjust and refine as needed. I just want to make everyone aware that we're going to attempt to do this for the next meeting as part of our overall strategy for increasing public participation in the transportation planning process. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
All right, anything else? We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Auburn.
That was Bill Herman, Linda.
I'll second.
And that was Peter Capano. And so just thumbs up all the way around. Thank you for the visual. And if you want to use your reaction mode, you can put a thumbs up that way too. All right, Jeff.
All right, so we'll call to order the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. First order of business is the meeting minutes from April 27th, 2021.
Auburn, I'll move approval.
Thanks, Bill.
Linda Kuhnhart, Town, second.
Thank you, Linda. All right, I'll go through the list. From Auburn, we have Bill Herman,
Yes.
Jeff Porter. From Bedford, I don't know if Bill is back yet, or not Bill, Jeff. From Bedford, Bill DeShaco,
Yes.
Charlie Fairman,
Yes.
Barbara Salvatore.
Abstain.
All right, thank you. From Candia, we have Al Hall.
Yes.
Thanks, we heard you that time. And Dick Snow.
Aye.
Thanks, Dick. From Chester, Deb Munson.
Yes.
Derry, Jeff Moulton.
Yes.
From Francistown, we have Alfred Eisenberg
Yes.
and Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
From Goffstown, we have Joanne Duffy
Yes.
and Barbara Griffin.
Abstain.
Thank you. From Londonderry, we have Brian Taglia,
Yes.
Arthur Rugg,
Yes.
Martin Trugus.
Abstain.
Thank you. From Manchester, we have Peter Capano. Peter still with us? And muted. Oh, no, I see he's empty there. All right, Ray Clement
Yes.
and Dan O'Neill.
Abstain.
Thanks, Dan. From New Boston, we have Mark Sunin.
Aye.
From Wyndham, Peter Griffin
Yes.
and John Hiltz.
Abstain.
Thanks, John. And is MTA still with us? Did he leave after that? Okay, I believe that's everybody.
All right, so that brings us to our next agenda item, National Association of Regional Councils update. from Eric Zimmerman, Executive Director of Transportation. I think we need to give him probably control.
Yes.
All right.
Linda, you can do that.
Yeah, I just did that.
All right, wonderful. And we just welcome back Eric Zimmerman. I think this is his third or fourth appearance. We've done this annually. I have to say, Eric, I think you have a longer beard this time. You have the COVID hairdo. So glad you can join us again. We really are grateful that you can keep us up to date on what's happening in Washington.
Well, thanks for having me. The beard is long. The hair used to be long too, but we took care of that once the vaccine had been acquired. So you're not catching me with quite the long hair. For folks, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me back again. For folks that have heard me before, you'll know I'm a proud a product of Manchester. So you are one of my favorite planning organizations in the country. Don't tell the other ones I've said that. But there is a hometown bias. My sister is still there in Goffstown. My mom still lives in Manchester, and I actually decamped to that area, to Manchester, for about 7 months over this past year, and we're actually going to be up for another 6 weeks or so. And I will say I saw some parts of the city that I hadn't really been in before, which is amazing because I'm from there, and we lived in some different parts of town, and I have to say we had a really lovely time, and it was a great time to be up there. So thanks so much for having me back. Let me share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see that. Let me get it into the right mode here. So I'm gonna do my best today to give you a little bit of an overview of what is going on in Washington. Sylvia obviously has great powers of I don't know, telling the future, because she booked me several months ago to do this, and it just so happens that the Senate EPW committee put out its version of transportation reauthorization just here within the last few days. So the timing is absolutely perfect to talk about some of what's going on. But I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly too about some of the other things that are happening as well. For those that haven't heard my spiel before, if you don't know who NARC is, we are a national association. We represent regional planning organizations from across the country, regional councils, councils of governments, MPOs, all types of names apply to them, but all essentially do the same thing. A lot of our focus, because our members' focus is on transportation, economic development, public safety, environmental issues. And in order to serve our members, such as yourselves at Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, we do advocacy on Capitol Hill. We do analysis, a lot of which you'll hear from today. We have peer-to-peer opportunities for members. We do webinars, we have committees. So there's a lot of ways to be engaged. We do 3 conferences a year as well. And registration is open now for our June virtual conference. If you're interested in checking out what we do, we're hoping to get back to at least a hybrid in the fall, but for now we remain fully virtual. So good opportunity to check out one of our conferences. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about 2 roads diverging in a wood, and that's kind of the overall theme of what is going on in Washington right now. There are several discussions going on, 2 primary discussions regarding how we're going to proceed on pulling together some funding for infrastructure and transportation. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that looks like. So the 2 roads, broadly defined, road 1 would be an approach where they use this reconciliation process, which I'll talk a little bit more about. You know, the American Jobs Plan is what the administration is calling its program, to pass a bill that would cover a really broad array of program categories, well beyond just transportation. This bill, as proposed, is somewhere in the vicinity of $2.3 trillion. We don't know exactly how they, actually that's not necessarily fair. They have proposed, the administration has proposed some tax changes that would pay for their bill, but certainly the future remains quite uncertain. And the key figure here may be Senator Manchin from West Virginia, who has indicated he's not, because this reconciliation process is a fully partisan process. It would be all Democratic votes in order to make this happen in the Senate. And Senator Manchin has already indicated that he's not necessarily comfortable with such a large investment at this time. And so that he has a lot of sway in how that road potentially proceeds. Road 2 would be a little bit more of a traditional approach. This is more along the lines of a traditional transportation reauthorization bill, where they basically affirm the programs that are in place, maybe add a few more on for things that have come up that are priorities. But in essence, it would probably look quite a bit like what the transportation bills we've seen that they pass every 5 or 6 years and have done so now for 30 years or so. This package would be expected to be less than $1 trillion. It's not exactly sure where the number would end up, 600, 800 billion. And certainly here, the pay for is really unknown. And we'll get into that a little bit as well. Also an uncertain future here. And in this case, it's really the Republicans that are key, because the administration, if they go this route, are doing so because they really want to have a bipartisan process and a bipartisan outcome. And so therefore, obviously, the Republicans are going to be key to making that happen. So let's talk a little bit about the first, which is the American Jobs Plan, this COVID recovery package. If we see something happen, the timing is likely to be in the more medium term. So we're talking probably something late summer or into the fall in order to have enough time to get something done, keeping in mind that Congress is away for much of August. They would be using this reconciliation process most likely. It is possible they could split the bill and do some of the bipartisan items in one bill and some of the less popular items in another bill. But I asked the question, can Congress walk and chew gum? And the answer is typically no, that really they're going to focus on one of these. They're not going to be able to do both at the same time. It's very unlikely. It's just not how they operate. I think I talked a little bit about this reconciliation process. It's what they used to pass the American Rescue Plan earlier this year. It's also what the tax bill was passed under the Trump administration. So both parties use this. It allows you to pass legislation with only 50 votes in the Senate, which is a big deal. But it also requires that anything that's in one of those bills has to have a budget tie-in. So you can't really make new policy, which makes it a little bit tricky for the purposes that we're discussing here. It's hard to know what the bill would contain. It's really hard to do a typical reauthorization process through reconciliation, because there really are a lot of policy changes in those bills. So what they've really done, I think, in many ways, is sort of blurred the line between an infrastructure package, the American Jobs Plan, and reauthorization. It's hard to tell at any time when somebody's talking about transportation investments or infrastructure investments, which one they're talking about. And I honestly think there's a lot of intentionality to that. It's primarily messaging, so that if anything passes, anything can be sort of chalked up as a win. And so it makes it hard, I think, for folks, that aren't immersed in this all the time to really know which it is that they're talking about at any given time. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on the American Jobs Plan. It's been out for a while. It's a $2.3 trillion bill, 8-year spend out. So it's about 1% per year investment of GDP. It takes an extremely expansive view of infrastructure, as I had mentioned, well beyond transportation into things like electric vehicles, schools, colleges, and childcare facilities, workforce, affordable housing. It really goes much farther beyond just transportation. And I'm not going to go into detail here either, except to say that this gives you an idea based on the investment that the bill would make of sort of where they're prioritizing the spend in each area. Transportation, of course, is the biggest, but significant investments made in some other areas, manufacturing in particular as well, and R&D. So to talk a little bit about the transportation specific elements, they do sort of try and at least get to a little bit of goal setting within this. It's not just here's a whole bunch of money, go out and spend it. It is, to modernize roads, highways, and main streets, kind of a fix-it-first approach. It has a heavy focus on bridges, both the sort of nationally significant bridges that carry a lot of freight and are particularly important for freight movement. Also, some of the smaller bridges across the country that are in need of repair. And then you can see a focus on transit as well. And again, you can sort of see by the dollar amounts that they would apply to each, sort of where they're prioritizing. There's an extremely significant investment in transit, $85 billion. That would be both for primarily for expansion projects of within metropolitan areas. There's $44 billion committed to large projects, the type of projects that are typically hard to fund without a dedicated funding source. A significant investment in Amtrak, you can see as well. And then particular investment in electric vehicles, where much of that would be direct spending with some and tax incentives as well to encourage folks to purchase these vehicles in the long run. So this gives you just a little bit of flavor for what is in the American Jobs Plan and where that type of a bill would head. Again, this would be a much more significant investment and require, the commitment of, like I said, 2.3 trillion. The administration recently has cut that down to 1.7 trillion to try and attract more Republicans to support the plan, and we'll see how that goes. The pay for here, as I mentioned, corporate tax increases. There's quite a few unknowns still. The administration really has put out this first draft as sort of an outline. We only know some of the details because of that outline. We don't know exactly how they would put this into legislative text. So we don't know, for example, what the expectation would be for local match. If you were to receive funding, how much would a community have to put up in order to be able to spend that funding? Usually it's about 20%. Right now, some of that funding is a little harder to come by given COVID and some of the challenges there. So we'll see what happens there. There's also GOP plans that have been put forward to try and that have a lower dollar amount, and we'll see how that all plays out too. So things to consider. This is a proposal. It's really a first draft. There's significant question, as I mentioned, whether there's congressional appetite for another multi-trillion-dollar bill, and a note that this is not reauthorization. So next, let's talk a little bit about reauthorization. So this is something that is a little bit more tangible because we currently have a program, and that program is going to expire. September 30th, 2021, the program is already extended once for 1 year. And so something does need to happen. Either a bill needs to be passed or an extension put in place before September. Both chambers have indicated that they will that there will be a fast process, but writing the bill quickly does not guarantee that there's a fast outcome. In other words, you're not going to guarantee that it's going to make it through either chamber very quickly. You might get it through the committee process, but it takes quite a bit longer to get it through the entire, to get it through both chambers. So the Senate bill, which I'll talk in a little bit of detail, was released this week. If folks remember, this is a little bit Groundhog Day because it's basically the same bill that they introduced 2 years ago from the Senate EPW Environment and Public Works Committee. There's 85 to 90% similarity between the two bills, I would say. And that bill, of course, didn't go anywhere. That's why they're having to reintroduce it this time around. Of course, there was a change in leadership in the Senate, so this is a Democrat written bill as opposed to the Republican written bill that we had 2 years ago. But even with that, much of the bill does remain the same. We're still waiting to see the House version. We did get a House bill last Congress as well, and so there's that will probably be largely the same as well. Right now, they are slogging through a number of earmark proposals. And so that bill has been held up a little bit by that process. So we're still waiting to see what the House is going to do. So the Senate reauthorization bill was just released this past Saturday. It has $304 billion in total contract authority. That's a third increase in funding compared to the total provided through the FAST Act. As I mentioned, it's largely the same as the last EPW bill. Some of the interesting areas are some of the new programs that the bill creates. There's a carbon reduction program, which provides about $6.4 billion, much of that to local communities for carbon reduction strategies. There's a PROTECT program, which focuses on resilience. There's $7.3 billion of that goes through formula to state DOTs. The other $1.4 billion are in grants. Again, MPOs and local areas are eligible for that funding, and 10% of it is earmarked specifically for planning purposes. There's a very significant bridge investment program, $7.2 billion, a rural surface transportation grants program for $2 billion. And these are all new programs. These are not programs that currently exist in legislation, and so it would be new areas of focus. We certainly expect to see that will carry the focus on climate with the carbon reduction program and the focus on resilience and some focus on equity. Those are some of the top line issues that we know that the administration and House and Senate leadership are interested in focusing on. And you can see that how that plays out here with some of the programs that they put into this legislation. And the House bill will be the same. It has focused on these areas as well. Also significant growth in funding through the Transportation Alternatives Program for bicycle and pedestrian projects as well. I mentioned earmarks. I'll just touch on it quickly. We do expect that earmarks will be part of a reauthorization if that moves. We also expect they're likely to be part of the appropriations process this year as well. The House has gone through the process of collecting those earmark requests. We're expecting each member to get somewhere between $15 and $20 million per member in what they call member-directed funding or member-directed spending. The Senate bill does not contain earmarks. They wanted to move more quickly with their bill and get it out before Memorial Day. And so it's unclear how the Senate's going to proceed on this, but we do expect that they will earmark if there are earmarks in a final package, including Senate Republicans, though that's also unclear what their approach is going to be. And I mentioned at the end, this could be a really important factor for something getting done. Bills with earmarks tend to have higher degrees of success, which is, I think, one of the reasons they were motivated to bring them back. When a member has some specific provisions that they've secured for their state or their district, it does tend to sort of grease the skids, as they say, and does make it more likely that you'll get broader support. And so these earmark provisions could be a really important part of getting something done this year, for better or worse. There are certainly those that don't like this process. But be that as it may, it does often help get bills through. So just to give you a lot of words here, just to give you a quick status update, as I mentioned, House Transportation and Infrastructure, we're waiting for them to act with their bill. The House Ways and Means Committee, which would pay for the House portion or the House proposal, hasn't acted yet. That's a very important piece of the puzzle. Senate EPW has put out its bill, but Senate Banking and Commerce, which have their own roles and responsibilities in a reauthorization, have not acted yet, and it's unclear as to what their timeline is going to be. In addition, Senate Finance, which will come out with the Senate proposal on funding, also has not done anything yet. So even though we're getting some action here on the EPW bill, there is a long way to go in order to get to the finish line here, if something's going to move this year. And so while we're mentioning the money, I always like to put out the sort of cold water reality-inducing chart of the Highway Trust Fund. The way this chart reads, if you look at the blue lines, that's the amount of funding that comes in every year through the federal gas tax. The green lines are where the Congress has done one-time transfers into the trust fund to keep it solvent. Because the red line, as you can see, which is well above those blue lines, is the current rate of spending that happens through federal legislation. You can see each year the spending that we're doing outstrips the amount coming into the trust fund by somewhere like $15 to $20 billion, and that expands as we go farther out. And so in order to even conceptualize a 5-year bill right now at current funding levels, we need something in the vicinity of $100 billion transferred into the trust fund in one form or another. And then the dashed red line would be the spend if the House proposal from last year, which as I mentioned will be similar this year, if that were to pass, you could see then the amount needed each year to keep the trust fund solvent grows even that much further, that much more. So that really is a challenge and something that does need to be solved before we're going to get ourselves to a reauthorization package. They've basically used these one-time transfers for quite a while now to backfill. Obviously, the program had survived previously just on fuel tax receipts. That's not the case anymore. There's no expectation that we'll see a gas tax increase. So the race to find another pay for to transfer funds in is certainly on and will be required. So I guess this begs the question, which road are we going to take? First, I have to be honest, there is, of course, a third option, and that is that we don't take a road at all, that no reconciliation bill passes, that we extend the transportation program and nothing happens on that this year. I think one could probably bet on that and feel like they have a chance of winning, because there is just so much uncertainty now about what is going on. The administration's proposal has been out for a while, and we sort of need a decision from the White House as to which path they want to take, if they want to go this partisan reconciliation path, or if they want to go the nonpartisan, the bipartisan path. That really is going to shape what this all looks like, and how it will proceed. The earmarks could certainly play a role. And if I had to make my best guess, I think honestly that what I see is a path where we get an extension, certainly, of the transportation program. I have a hard time seeing how that gets done, and that there is some kind of a reconciliation package. I don't think it'll be in that $2.3 trillion range. I think it will be probably significantly less than that, but will allow the administration to focus on these areas that they really have highlighted, and do so with some meaningful funding behind it. So that's my best guess, but I will be the first to admit that it is very unclear right now as to where this is headed. So that is my brief update from Washington. I am certainly happy to answer any questions and go deeper into anything that folks wanted to hear some more about. And thank you again for having me today.
Eric, any discussion at the federal level on how to get revenue from electric vehicles to make up for, the lack of a gas tax?
Yeah, that's interesting. So one thing that the Senate bill contains, and that's new this year, it was not in the bill 2 years ago, is a pilot program to look at per mileage user fee, and that often in the states that have implemented that per mileage user fee, it often comes with an electric vehicle registration fee that you can either get out of or pay by the mile, and then you sort of cap out. So if you drive more miles than you would have paid in the fee, then it sort of caps it at that fee. And those are really at this point pilots that they're looking at to see if they can make a per mileage user fee pencil out and work. So they want to look at this at the national level. It's happening at some states. I think the discussion about strictly using electric vehicle fees for the federal program, the challenge there is that the numbers are so small on the number of electric vehicles that even if you were to do that, the amount collected would be pretty nominal. It might be something that they put in place so that as the number of vehicles grows, it'll obviously begin to collect more money, into the trust fund. But I think for the immediate fix, I think that's that's where folks are sort of realizing that it really does not collect a whole lot of money at least in the near term. So it might be more of a longer term play.
Mark Sunan has a question.
Yeah, thank you. So your perspective from Washington, are we likely to see a change in the formula funding based on 2020 census data coming out and New Hampshire actually having more people than Vermont? Will we actually get the equivalent amount of dollars to go with that?
I would love to tell you there are many ways and in many places where the funding formulas are outdated, often going back and going back as far as 1990 data, because these are things that passed at the end of the 90s. And so therefore we're using 1990 data, and now they've been sort of baked into the distribution of funds at the federal level. And this is not a fight that anybody seems excited to take up or willing to take up. And so I think that you're going to see the same distribution, which is essentially basing the amount you receive in this bill on what you received in the last bill, which bakes in a formula that goes back a number of years. So I think you're not necessarily going to see a correction that you're looking for. In areas that are quickly growing, those are the ones that are hurt the most by this sort of stagnant approach. But it's just not something that we've seen any energy to take up, and because it would be controversial. There'd be significant winners and losers. In many cases, those losers would be in areas where leadership comes from, to be perfectly frank about it. And so they're California, New York, they're not as interested in having that discussion. And so I at least at this point, from what I see, that's just not a serious consideration.
Thank you.
I see somebody asked a question in the chat about the mileage user fee. There are 3 states that are currently, or 2 states where they're currently piloting this approach. That's in Oregon and Utah. And then a 3rd state, Virginia, is gearing up. They passed the legislation, but they're probably not going to come online with it till a little bit later. In those cases, in one case, it is only electric vehicles that can even opt into the program at all. In the other case, any high efficiency vehicle, so basically from hybrid to hybrid electric and all electric, can opt in. And again, it's structured in a way it's really a data gathering exercise. They want to encourage people to do it so that they can learn how it works. And so they tie it to an electric vehicle or a high efficiency vehicle fee, and then collect up to the point at which the taxes collected would outstrip the fee, and then they stop collecting. But it's really more a data gathering exercise, and I'm not sure that they would necessarily structure it this way if they were to fully implement it. We'll have to see what these pilots bring us. There's also been piloting of this. The Eastern Transportation Coalition has done quite a bit of piloting, and there's a Western Coalition that's piloting this as well. So we're going to start to learn fairly soon quite a bit about how this could work and whether it would have a viability nationally as well.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Eric.
All right, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, and maybe next time in person, I hope.
Same time next year, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. And so moving on to our last agenda item is the fiscal year 2022 budget with Nate.
All right, I do have a brief kind of overview presentation. It'll be brief, but I think it'll be helpful. Just pulling it up. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just walk through some of the highlights of our proposed fiscal year 22 budget. We have been vetting the fiscal 22 budget closely with both our budget and executive committees. So it's now at the point where it's gone through the committee review process, both at the budget and executive committee, and now we're proposing it to the full commission for your consideration. I will not, this presentation does not go line by line, but I'm happy to, it rather hits the highlights, but I'm happy to take any questions afterwards about any specific line items of the budget. So big picture wise, the fiscal year 22 budget is at 1.606 million in revenues. That's down 3.33% from fiscal year 2021. And expenses also down to 1.605 million. And that's a 3.37 reduction from fiscal year 2021 levels. What underlies that on the revenue side, we had some significant one-time projects come to an end in fiscal year 2021. The Manchester Transit Oriented Development Project being completed was a big part of that. That was a significant one-time only contract that was in our fiscal year 2021 budget. We do have some new funding streams in fiscal year 22 to support elderly and disabled transportation initiatives in the region. I'll talk about that in a few slides. And then we also have a modest increase in our funding for our Unified Planning Work Program, which is our master planning contract with New Hampshire DOT. On the expense side, the most significant change is in the New Hampshire retirement system employer contributions. So as I'm sure you all know, the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission is a political subdivision of the state of New Hampshire, just as any city or town is a political subdivision of the state of New Hampshire. And New Hampshire retirement system has a particular rate for employer contributions for political subdivisions, and that rate is increasing significantly fiscal year 2022. The setting of that rate is out of our hands. That happens at the state level, but we have to, our employer contribution has to be what what the rate at the state level is set at. And for this coming year, I think the delta is somewhere in the 25% plus range. So it's a significant change in retirement system employer contributions. We're also seeing an increase in our health insurance costs, not to the same level of the increase of New Hampshire retirement system, but it's a cost driver for us as well on the health insurance side. So narrowing a little bit on revenues, looking at municipal dues, we are moving forward with the municipal dues structure that the commission adopted back in September 22nd, 2020. That holds our dues rate level at 67.6 cents per capita, but adjusted to the most recent, that being the 2019 Office of Strategic Initiatives municipal population estimate. So that was adopted back in September, I think you may all recall. We do have a new local project this year, which has just started recently, and we expect will continue into an early portion of fiscal year 22, and that is providing circuit rider planning assistance to the town of Wyndham. The town of Wyndham is a little bit short-handed in their planning department at the moment, and has signed a contract with the commission for our staff to help the town out and provide some additional staffing assistance during this period where they're in between and have some an empty seat in their planning office. We're filling in temporarily while they go through hiring processes and such to fill their staff. On the state and federal contract side, as I mentioned, our CTAP Phase 3 project for the Manchester Transit Oriented Development Plan was completed in fiscal year 2021. But our other CTAP project, which is a statewide effort for transportation demand management services, we expect will continue throughout fiscal year 22. We are anticipating a new hazard mitigation plan update in the town of Candia, and we also have just we're working with New Hampshire DES right now on the paperwork to assist the town of Chester with an update to their source water protection plan. Also, on the state and federal contract side, we are entering into a new 2-year Unified Planning Work Program contract with New Hampshire DOT. Our funding is increasing by $10,000 per year, and this budget assumes that we will draw down the UPWP on an even split between the 2 years of the contract. And perhaps most significantly, our Section 5310 Elderly and Disabled Transit Service funding is primarily funding that we pass through to the transit providers in the region for various services that they provide. That's going to be increasing by more than 16% in fiscal year 22. In part, that's due to a state level discretionary transfer of CMAQ funding, congestion mitigation and air quality program funding, to the Section 5310 program to support regional mobility management activities that are overseen by the Regional Coordinating Council. Other revenues, our 4-year Becoming Age Friendly program that I think you're all familiar with, that was funded by the Tufts Health Plan Foundation. That did conclude in fiscal year 2021. So that's there's no line item for that item in fiscal year 22. We do anticipate that the commission will receive another $3,500 outreach contribution from AARP in fiscal year 22. And we're also anticipating that there will be no issues or changes with our first floor tenant, the Holy Cross Family Learning Center, and that they will continue to be our tenant at current lease income levels throughout fiscal year 22. On the expense side of the budget, overall salary and benefit costs are up 5.48% from the current budget. As I mentioned, the biggest driver of that is the substantial increase that we are seeing in New Hampshire retirement system employer contributions in fiscal year 22. For us, that just the change in New Hampshire retirement system is more than $20,000 just for our agencies. So, and we're 10 people currently. And so the change is that the city and towns around the state are also going to be dealing with those same retirement system increases in their budgets as well. Our staffing is anticipated to be 11 employees plus a seasonal intern in fiscal year 22. So we do have an open position right now that for a data analyst that we are seeking to fill. So just like fiscal year 21, we're anticipating a full staffing level for us would be 11 employees plus a seasonal intern. So no change there. On the contractor and consultant expenses, we do have, as I mentioned, that increased revenue for the elderly and disabled transportation service program. That's called the Section 5310 program, is almost completely offset by additional expenses from our transit providers. So Manchester Transit Authority's funding is modestly decreasing a couple of %, and that's because they have realized some operational efficiencies from the CART merger, which is what we were hoping would happen. That some economies of scale will come into play, and we could have more transit service for the same amount of funding in that program, and that is coming true. There have been some efficiencies due to the MTA and CART merger and the good management of Mike Whitten at MTA. Our Regional Coordinating Council has approved some additional service hours for the Rockingham Nutrition Meals on Wheels to provide transportation services to the Vic Geary Center in Plastow. Plastow is not in the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission region, but some of those $5310 that we administer are for communities that are slightly outside of our region, and Plastow is one of those. So we partner with our colleagues at the Rockingham Planning Commission, who are also members of the Regional Coordinating Council, to program services in those communities as well. And Rockingham Nutrition Meals on Wheels is going to be providing additional services next year to that congregate meal site, the Vic Geary Center in Plastow. The regional mobility management funding that it will be transferred from the CMAQ program. We anticipate that we will go through a procurement process for a consultant, whether that consultant is an individual or partnership or a corporate consulting firm, remains to be seen. But we will go through a procurement process open to all individuals, partnerships, and firms to fill those mobility management services under the oversight of the Regional Coordinating Council. Other expenses, so here on the professional services and operating expenses, we will have a slight increase to our external audit costs because the additional funding in the Section 5310 program has grown large enough that it is now included alongside our Unified Planning Work Program as part of our single audit. So we're anticipating some marginally increased expenses in the audit line item for that reason. Computer and software costs are also increasing in part due to the pandemic and our need to be able to facilitate electronic meetings, remote presentations, etc. In fact, we've just been having conversations with our IT vending firm, our IT vendor this week, that has led already to some internet speed increases in our office, as well as some IT upgrades that we're going to be making here in the commission's conference room to improve our ability to facilitate remote meetings. We do anticipate that some in-person meetings, travel, and workshops are going to begin to resume during fiscal year 22. So the travel line item, the workshop and conference expense line items reflect that we think that some return to normalcy in terms of in-person travel and workshops, et cetera, will happen probably after the first quarter of fiscal year 22. That is looking into the crystal ball a little bit, but we certainly do anticipate that in-person meetings and travel will be coming back during fiscal 22. Lastly, some other considerations. We did a few years ago we had significant expenses that we invested in the building here with capital improvements to the building, those being solar panels, as well as we had 2 long tenured staff members retired during that time frame, and there were costs associated with that, expenses associated with that. Since that has happened, the last 3 years have been very positive years for the commission. Fund balance is in a very solid position, and over the coming months, we're going to be working. The staff will be working with both our budget and executive committees to review our fund balance target and discuss and consider what strategic reserves may be needed to address future capital needs. So that will be a discussion that happens over the coming months. But I'm certainly pleased to report to everyone that the Commission's fund balance is in a healthy and strong position, and that the Commission is in a capable and good position financially. And that's it. And so that's kind of the high level overview of the budget. I didn't want to go line by line through things. We are time constrained, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions folks may have.
There are no questions. Do we have a motion to adopt?
We approve the recommended action for the 22 budget.
I don't know if everybody heard that. Al Hall, who was here in the room with us, moved approval of the budget.
Alberno second.
All right, I'll take you through this. So Auburn, Bill Herman,
Yes.
Jeff Porter.
Yes.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. Bedford, Bill DeShaco,
Yes.
Charlie Fairman,
Yes.
Barbara Salvatore.
Yes.
Thanks, Barbara. Candia Al.
Sorry, it was on mute, but
Yes.
Al Hall voted yes. You can hear him in the background.
Yeah, we heard him. Dick Snow. Dick Snow from Candia. All right, moving on. Chester, Deb Munson.
Yes.
Thanks, Deb. Derry, Jeff Moulton.
Yes.
Francistown, we have Alfred Eisenberg
Yes.
and Linda Kuhnhart.
Yes.
Goffstown, Joanne Duffy. Maybe Joanne had to step away, and Barbara Griffin.
Yes.
From Londonderry, we have Brian Battaglia
Yes.
and Arthur Rugg
Yes.
and Marty Struve.
Approved.
Thanks, Marty. From Manchester, Peter Capano. Okay, Peter stepped
Yeah,
away.
good job, Sylvia and Nate. I vote yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. And Ray Clement.
Yes.
Thanks, Ray. Dan O'Neill.
Yes.
Thanks, Dan. From New Boston, we have Mark Sunan.
Aye.
Great. From Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin
Yes.
and John Hiltz. All right, I think John had to step away as well. Okay, I think that is it.
Any other business, Sylvia, before we adjourn?
No other business, just thumbs up, but I was going to ask if Dan O'Neill could stick around. I'll stop the recording